and then perhaps a NATO country. There has never been a moment in which NATO has been as useful as it is right now. Finland and Sweden have already joined NATO. It is very good on them. It's a very good choice to join NATO now, to be able to save yourself from similar treatment from the Russian terrorist regime. Of course, Russia moaned and Russia cried about it. How dare Finland and Sweden join NATO? But my friends, what power does the Russian terrorist regime have over sovereign nations? What power do they have over the decisions in Finland and Sweden? NATO is a voluntary defense organization. The only countries that join NATO are the ones who want to join NATO. If Ukraine wants to join NATO, it is in Ukraine's power and in Ukraine's right to join NATO. It's as simple as that. And right now, let's look at a similar situation to Ukraine. Let's look at the Baltic countries. Our friends, some of the countries that have supported us the most throughout this war, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Thank you very much. These countries are smaller and have a smaller military than Ukraine. How come the Russians have not invaded them? They also have a Russian minority on their lands. They also have been blamed by the Russian terrorist regime of being supposedly, thank you very much, of being supposedly Nazi regimes and hating on the Russian minorities. So how come? Where were Russia's teeth against these countries? The difference is clear. These countries were part of NATO. If Russia invaded them, they knew that there would be clear repercussions, immediate repercussions. But with Ukraine, Russia had a different rhetoric. With Ukraine, all of a sudden, Russia can behave freely. Russia can genocide freely. They can do whatever they please. No more. Ukraine should have joined NATO, just like Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, and many others. Ukraine should have been part of the same community, the European community, not the Muscovite community, not the Muscovite great kleptocracy. That is where Ukraine should have been. That is what the Ukrainian people have chosen. And this is something very interesting that the Russophiles and the apologists always mention. They speak to us about the will of the Russian people in Ukraine. Should they not be consulted? Should they not be asked? Well, my friends, they were consulted. They were asked. They chose to be in Ukraine. When the Soviet Union collapsed, every single Ukrainian region has voted to join Ukraine. And every single one besides Crimea had voted more than 80% to join Ukraine. In Crimea, it was a bit more than 50%. So, it was not only the choice of the people, of the majority of the people in Ukraine. It was the overwhelming choice of the people in Ukraine. But of course, has Putin, the crook, the criminal, the liar, mentioned this referendum? Has he ever mentioned it even once? Never. Because the only referendums that Putin mentions are his sham referendums that he perpetrates himself at gunpoint. And how very interesting that after the Russian military went to Crimea, after the Russian military had occupied Crimea, all of a sudden the Crimeans had shifted their opinion and all of a sudden they wanted to join Russia. Supposedly, of course. And very interesting situations have emerged with some cities in Crimea voting 110, 120, 115% to join Russia. Very interesting situations indeed, I'm sure you'll agree. 115% out of 100%. It's a very interesting conundrum. How would that happen? But of course, voter fraud is not something that the Russian terrorist regime is new to. They already know how to do it for a very long time. They've helped Viktor Bandukovich, as we like to call him, to get power in Ukraine. When he was found guilty of voter fraud in the first election that he tried to get elected into. In the first election, he was caught red-handed, and yet he was allowed to run for president again, a few years after that. How is this a legitimate presidency, my friends? It is not. How is this not Russia's doing? It is, of course. And only a fool would not be able to see it. Only a fool, or perhaps somebody with very, very fat pockets filled up with Muscovite rubles. One of those two. Those are the only people, my friends, who would not be able to see this situation clearly as it is. This is clear as day right now, and it always was, my friends. But now even more than before, more than ever before,